I'd like to welcome you to the Board of Commissioners work session, March 28, 2024. First, we will need an approval of the agenda.
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion passes. Approval of the agenda. Our station EMS, we now have the opportunity to move forward with the fire station. We have several topics to discuss, and I will ask to be led off by our great Chief Perry.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to bring to you tonight some pretty big steps in our fire EMS station project. You will recall several of us have been working on this for quite a number of years as we prepare to provide a new permanent home for our fire department, as well as a permanent home for our EMS units that are stationed in this area. So we're very excited to have a lot of our project team here tonight, many of which you'll be hearing from. We have representatives from Wake County EMS as well. So we're excited to bring some of this as this project moves from a concept and an idea to becoming actual, to getting this project underway and starting the different various elements of construction. So we'll start off tonight. As each one of you know, we went and pursued some congressional funding to help us with our project. Mr. Tobias Fullwood is here tonight from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who is administering that grant. And we'll be going over with you the conditions of the grant and what's involved in that grant. So we'll call up Mr. Fullwood to come up first and talk to you about the USDA grant. Each one of the items that we talk about tonight will have action items associated with them on Monday. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go through, but we certainly will entertain any questions that you may have as we go through the different portions tonight. So.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tobias Fullwood with USDA Rural Development. I'm here to present the letter of conditions and the conditions set forth with the congressionally directed spending grant that was awarded to the town, the 2022 congressionally directed spending bill through the then Senator Byrd's office. You guys were awarded $7.5 million for the fire station. And again, as Chief mentioned, I'll be going through, it's a number of pages associated with the conditions. I'll hit some high notes and answer any questions. It's very informal, so if you guys have any questions while I'm going through it, just let me know, and we'll try to answer any questions that you guys may have either today or between now and when you guys make your official business on Monday, okay? All right. So the letter of conditions basically set forth the conditions associated with the grant. The $7.5 million through the Community Facilities Program, and also through the rural housing services that we offer through rural development. Basically, the conditions today are not, per the language in the conditions, is not saying that the funds have been obligated for you guys. Once you guys make official business and officially accept the conditions associated with the grant, you guys will receive, it's a form the mayor will sign, bid at 1940-1. It's a request to obligate the funds. You'll receive that back in the mail. That lets you know, that lets the town know that the funds, the $7.5 million have been obligated for the town for this purpose, for the purpose of the fire station, okay? The total project, based on the actual application, is $14,613,000, and some odd dollars associated with the actual application package. That is a combination of the USDA funds, the Wake County funds, as well as the town of Zebulon funds that will all collectively come together to complete the total project. Okay? All right. I'll just skip a few. The total, as far as the obligation or as far as the additional funds that will be set forth, is $7,113,525 will come from Wake County as well as through town of Zebulon. Security associated with excuse my term, of financing. We do a lot of financing for a lot of municipalities across the state and across the country. So this is a grant, this is not financing, so if I use the term financing, please forgive me, okay? We will have security interest into the facility, so part of the approval and some things I would need from Attorney Vernon is a filing of federal interest on that property. Basically, it goes to the Register of Deeds with the property description associated with that site, okay? That federal interest will stay in place for 20 years. So if the town were to sell that property, there could potentially be some funds that may be owed back to the federal government. I know you guys own it. You're not going to sell the fire station. Chief might not be very happy about that. But if that were to ever occur, there may be some funds that may be owed back to the federal government. Okay?
Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Since this parcel that is being used for the fire department was part of a larger single parcel purchase, and this might not be a question for you, it actually might just be a question for Chief Perry. Is the site going to be split off so that there are two separate parcels then, so that if we decide to do anything with the remaining parcel that was involved in that initial purchase, that's not going to become something that the federal government says, now we got a problem?
So there have been a few conversations about that, and even the potential of combining that parcel with the town hall project, because there's some advantages from, like you said, from separating as well as combining. The answer to your question is, I think that's something we need to look at, figure out what is in the best interest of the town. Is it in the best interest to subdivide this piece from the rest, or is it in our best interest to do a combination? Some of that, when we look at how the different parts of impervious surface and stuff like that, there's advantages and disadvantages in both ways. So that's something we'll need to confirm and figure that out for sure.
So naturally, before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything, we'll need to have that cleaned up so that we have a good understanding of, you know, this is the parcel that needs to remain available to the federal government, and this other part of the land that we made with that purchase can be done with, like, in the future as our needs, you know, present themselves.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And either way, we're not taking a lien on the property, so the value does not.
Right.
It's not being determined or taken as security, so whatever way works best for the town will work best for us.
The federal government's interest in that property is in the use,
Correct.
not necessarily the definition of the real estate or the boundaries.
Correct, but we purchased more than what we are going to use for the fire station.
That's correct. And as the chief said, we'll need to decide how to strike that balance between subdividing it away or what benefits we have from keeping it as a larger parcel. Maybe we end up with something in between.
Okay.
If we have to have
Now, will that
impervious
have to
surfaces.
take place prior to us entering into the memorandum of understanding or continuing forward with the grant? I'm assuming we'll have to
So
have that
the
ironed out.
MOU or the federal interest has to be filed prior to construction. So there's some time.
Okay,
There's some
okay.
time before we get to that.
Excellent. Thank you so very much.
They're going to mention that a little
Okay.
later as far as the time frame. So
Okay.
there's some time that the town can make that
Yeah.
decision. Absolutely. All right. Basically, number 3 mentions the interest and the bonding requirements. It's spelled out in the letter of conditions. So making sure that we have proper insurance and things of that nature associated with that property. That town, I'm sure that you guys already have in place. Civil rights impact and equal opportunity, there will be an agreement in the package that will be executed on Monday that there's no discrimination as far as your town. There will be annual monitoring as far as audits, requirements that are set forth in the grant agreement. There will also be a civil rights compliance review that we will complete every 3 years once the project's complete. So basically we have to notate and take a look at the hiring practices for the town, making sure there's no discrimination, things of that nature associated with the town. Okay. All right. The environmental review, we did a complete phase 1 on that property, as well as an environmental report. Based on that environmental report, there were 3 mitigation measures that were complete, that were provided. It's the historic preservation, threatened and endangered species, and wetlands. We cannot impact any wetlands, and I think we verified that we are not impacting any wetlands associated with the site. If during construction, your construction team goes out and they were to hit human remains in the ground, we ask them to stop, notify the state, notify us, things of that nature associated with that site that's there. And then in threatened and environmental species, threatened and endangered species, making sure that we're not killing their habitat for the most part. But that's a pretty clean site, so I don't think we're gonna have to worry about anything associated with that. Okay. And that's really the condition set for, I'm sorry, Build America, Buy America. That's a law now. As of February 2022, if I'm not mistaken, Build America, Buy America, your architect and your contractor have to certify that Build America, Buy America has been, to the best of their ability, complied with. That basically says that any component associated with this site is made in the United States. That's for economic boost here in the States. So, and we've discussed it, and they understand the components associated with that, and they have some questions that we will certainly try to address that to avoid any issues or any delays associated with construction. Okay? Any additional questions of me?
And Eric looked over the letter of conditions as well to look at it from a town perspective. And Eric, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add. I know you've got more experience from dealing with USDA and these type of arrangements. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to bring to the group's attention.
You know, I would say that the USDA is very thorough in the way they approach their grants. There is always a significant amount of representations and compliance that you have with certain federal guidelines. And we just need to be attentive to those things and make sure that when we hire our consultants that they have experience in dealing with USDA types of grants, and make sure that we file the reports on time, and that if we have any change orders, we get them approved ahead of time. Just good business when you get right down to it. But the document is thorough and it is complicated. And so we need to be attentive and careful as we go through it.
Okay. And I will put a quick plug in for rural development as far as what I do. We do financing for nonprofit organizations as well as municipalities across the state and rural areas across the state of North Carolina and across the nation, actually. We do financing, new fire truck. We can do this new station. We could finance that out. It would not be a $7.5 million grant. It will likely be a loan, but our low interest extended term loans is what a lot of our municipalities or our nonprofits, they come to me, they call me, or if it's here in the town or in the county or some other areas, certainly just reach out and we'll try to get some assistance with one of our specialists. Okay?
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Tobias, thank you for your help with that. So our next item is our Wake County design team. I can't overestimate how powerful having Wake County as a partner in this project is, has been, will be. As their staff, they build buildings and deal with a lot of the elements that we're talking about. That's what they do. That is absolutely not what I do. I am learning very quickly what it means, at least learning a very skimming the surface of it. So we're lucky to have them on board. Tonight, what you'll hear from is 3 different elements. ADW Architects and Mike Esposito will talk about our schematic design, that concept idea and how we bring that to life. Then we'll have an overview of the CMAR construction delivery method that we've kind of provided some brief history for you, but we can get into that a little bit deeper tonight. And then we'll talk about the MOU, the First Amendment to our Memorandum of Understanding between us and the county, and that kind of provides that framework for how the town and the county continue to work together on this project. So we'll talk about that as that'll carry us through this next phase of work. You'll recall that this site was chosen, the former GSK site behind and around Town Hall. It was chosen not because it was at Town Hall, but because it was one of the primary geographically, strategically located areas to locate a fire station. When you look at the area we serve, this is the geographic center. It enables us to provide a better travel time to the entire constituency that we protect. So that's how we got it. And some of you recall meeting upon meeting as we looked at different sites and potential sites. And as we worked through the site selection process, we ultimately, as Commissioner Baxter referred to earlier, the site that surrounded Town Hall, and we were able to purchase that from GSK. And then from there, we looked at that site and we looked at different options. Should we go with a Arundel Avenue-based station location? Should we go with a Judge Street? And we looked at different sites on that piece of property, and we came back to the site on Judge Street as the best location, looking at all of that. From there, we brought in ADW, who has already had a working relationship with Wake County, doing some of their fire and EMS station projects. ADW began the design work and was a big part of our sessions, with our public sessions, where we took public input. And so Mike will kind of walk us through the site and the design that they have worked up for us.
Good evening, Commissioners. What you're looking at is the current layout of the fire station site. The layout was based on the fact that we have a residential aspect across the street, Judge Street. So we tried to be careful with the scale and the look of that building at the fronting Judge Street. So basically the building has what we consider two faces. So we have a residential face facing Judge Street, but we also have a civic face which faces the town hall, and we're considering that more or less a civic campus side. The larger apparatus bay is pushed to the back, again, to buffer it, to be buffered from the neighborhood and residential across Judge Street. We didn't want the apparatus to come straight out with the lights shining into the neighbors across the street. The access drive is also aligned with Church Street straight across, so they're coming straight out onto an existing street. So for the most part, that was what was driving the design. We did have 2 great community meetings where a lot of folks showed up. They were very complimentary on the design, and they liked everything that they had seen. So it was good input from the citizens. We'll move forward. The building is approximately 24,000 square feet, a little bit more. 5 bays again. So the town hall is actually to the bottom across the field right now. 5 bays, but the fire department shares some bays with Wake EMS. To the left, we have fire admin as well as EMS admin, some training rooms, and some bunk rooms. The left side of the building, again, that faces Judge Street, so that's what we're calling the residential side, which is 1 story. The back side, where the apparatus base is approximately 1.5 stories. So Again, this is what we're considering the residential side or facing Judge Street. As you can see, it has overhangs, awnings to speak to that residential character, as well as traditional brick material, low roofs, 1 story. So in scale, it's trying to match the scale of a typical residential home. When you get on the town hall side, or what we're considering the civic campus side, you can see that 1 story continues back and then it steps up to where the apparatus bay is, which is the larger mass towards the back of the building. Again, this is another view of the apparatus bay. So the trucks come out, they turn right, and then they basically move to Judge Street. This is the back of the building, which faces the woods, the current woods that are on that back corner. We're considering this more or less the non-public side. But the trucks come in back off Judge Street. It is a pull-through apparatus bay, so the returning trucks come, they turn to the back of the station and back into the apparatus bay. There's a bird's eye view. And you can see the scale of the front of the building versus the back. Some sustainable design strategies, which we incorporate into all of Wake County projects and most of our ADW projects. Native drought-tolerant landscaping. We don't do any on-site irrigation. LED site lighting, high solar reflective index. For paving, we typically do concrete paving because of the weight of the apparatus vehicles, but also we achieve some SRI credit for that. We do BMP or SEM stormwater control on site. Some of the building features, again, regionally sourced materials such as brick, high performance glass and glazing systems, high performance SRI roof. Again, we select colors that mitigate the heat from the sun, which helps in the mechanical systems for the building envelope. LED interior lighting and controls. And then we also incorporate low flow fixtures throughout the building to save on water use. Turn it over to Mark Forestieri with Wake County.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mark Forestieri. I'm the Director of Facilities Design and Construction for Wake County. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about construction manager at risk. In June 2014, the North Carolina legislature required advanced justification by public bodies for alternative project delivery. And alternative project delivery simply means something that's different than your traditional design, bid, build, or what we call single prime contracting. Basically, the public entity, or in this case, the town, must determine the advantages and disadvantages of this alternative method. And so what I'm going to do is go through those advantages and disadvantages for you so that you have a public record of it. This is something that we typically do with the CM projects that we've done. So traditional competitive bid methods, again, that's what I referred to as design, bid, build, or single prime contracting. The contract is awarded to the lowest responsible responsive bidder. That's what it's been for years. In that method, there's no involvement by the contractors in the design phase of the project. They purely come on board after they bid it and are awarded the contract. So the owner at that point has no information really about the price or bid cost drivers until the project is bid. Yes, we may get estimates from the design team, but we don't really know what's driving the cost. There may be specific things that we were unaware of that drives that cost up. The dotted line in this diagram that note that says pre-construction involvement, that simply graphically depicts what I was just saying, is that in the early part of the project during design, you would typically have the owner and the architect. There would be no involvement by the contractor in this particular, in this standard type of delivery method. With construction manager at risk, you hire the CMAR, we refer to them as CMs, during pre-construction. So you're actually hiring them during the design phase. So at that point, you have the architect, the owner, and you also have the CM, and the CM is involved early in the project to give you additional advice, and I'll go through a little bit more about what their role is. But among the general things, again, their involvement begins in the design phase. They're responsible for coordination and complete construction, and they pre-qualify and publicly bid all subcontracts with an enhanced MBE, or Minority Business Enterprise outreach. I'm going to start with construction first. They're essentially like a contractor, but they also have an additional responsibility to the owner as a fiduciary, which means that any decision they make financially is in the best interest of the owner, not in their best interest. Aside from that, they will prepare their construction contract recommendation. They provide overall management of construction and logistics. They have constant management of the schedule and cost, and also assistance in managing the Build America, Buy America requirements. There are CMs we know that we've talked with that have specific experience in that, and that is a very administrative intensive activity that they have to do. There's a lot of documentation that's required for that, and putting that onto a general contractor just at the bid point, many of them don't have that type of experience or don't have the type of patience to deal with that. So in addition to that, in the pre-construction phase, which again is also the design phase, the CM will prepare detailed cost estimates. They'll also review constructability and make recommendations for efficiency. So as the project's being designed, they're there at the table offering advice, asking questions, probing a little bit, saying, do you really want to do it this way? You know, we have a better way to do this that can save money, can save time. They also develop their schedules during the design phase, as opposed to not being able to develop their schedule until they win the project. They actually can develop it early on, and then they can develop a critical path, and then they constantly update their schedule based on what implications there are to how the project's being bid, and then other external factors like supply chain delays, et cetera. And then they bid competitively the subcontracts, and again, provide guidance for designing on the design end for Build America, Buy America compliance. So this is getting into the actual advantages of the CMAR method, and I've already kind of hinted at what that is, and that diagram at the bottom simply says that they're involved in nearly the entire project along with the owner and the design team. Again, this is an ability to select a team with Build America, Buy America expertise. A CM is selected on a quality-based selection in the same way that you select an architect or an engineer. That's required by statutes. And by doing this, you get the best type of schedule control and potentially a faster overall delivery because they know what all the parameters are and what all of the things that push and pull the schedule. They know that from the beginning. There's better integrated team involvement, so we're all on the same team. It's a collaborative process. It's a much less contentious process. There's a transparency to the overall process. Essentially, it's an open book, so you know what all of their cost assumptions are. You don't know that when you have a single prime bid. And then obviously it's better ability to be able to forecast the cost during the design phase. Single prime advantages, there are still some. I also said in parentheses, CMAR disadvantages. It's a basic traditional process. There's no advanced board approval required to utilize the method. There's less planning involved, and there's no separate selection process required. We use single prime many times. With the majority of our projects with the county are single prime, but there are those that are sufficiently complicated enough or large enough that we that CMAR works out better for us. So as you can see in this diagram, the single prime is only involved from the point that they've bid it and then have been awarded the contract. Their disadvantages are just the opposite of that, and I've made mention of those already. But in addition, because they're not involved in the design and planning phase, they're not invested in the project at the onset, and so their approach is going to tend to be reactive versus proactive. They'll be aware of a lot of the issues because they'll have anticipated them in the design phase, whereas they're not able to anticipate those until they actually receive the drawings at bid time. It's also a low bid method and not a qualifications method. And there's no criteria of experience with Build America, Buy America. And just like a CM is open book, they're closed book. So we don't know what any of their assumptions are, that they don't have to share them with us, and they typically don't. So there's no real incentive to offer any quality-based advice. Now, when I say this, I'm not downplaying single prime contracting. I'm just saying that we have more advantages for CM in a type of a project like we're doing, like we're proposing here. This chart was put together just to give you a little idea with two projects that the county has done or is doing. And it just kind of gives you a little bit of a gauge as to the scale. On the left, the extreme left, you have 5 different qualities or constraints or considerations for how you might look at a project. One is obviously the project budget. One may be the funding source. Programming, what type of a building is it? What's its building type? Our site challenges end up being a pretty important consideration. And then what additional constraints are there? Our first project is Apex Maine EMS. We bid that a few months ago. It's a $4 million project. It's a relatively small basic EMS station. The site challenges are minimal. In this particular case, we were fortunate enough to get a fairly simple site outside of some road improvements we have to make. And there's not really any additional constraints. So that was pretty cut and dried, and therefore was fine for us to proceed as a single prime contract. The middle one is a project for which we just received schematic design approval from our board, is Western Regional Center, which is in Cary. This one is kind of right on the edge. Dollar value wise, we're in the $10 to $15 million range threshold if we make a decision to go with CM. In some cases, it might be a little bit more than that. In some cases, it might be a little bit less. The things on that project that really tipped the scale were that we have a fairly sloping site, we have a lot of utility crossings, and in particular, we're sharing a parking lot with Dorcas Ministries. And that parking lot has a lot of traffic that goes back and forth. And so we want to make this as safe as possible, not only permanently, but also while we're under construction, so that there are some really significant site logistics there in order to maintain an active services center and maintain safe operations. So those things, for us, really tip the scale to CM at risk. And we're right on the verge of selecting a CM for that project. We went through interviews last week. For your project and our project, the Zebulon Fire and EMS Station, the USDA grant has a lot of steps to it that you heard. The fire station in and of itself is a relatively uncomplicated project to build, and the site challenges fortunately don't appear to be at this point that significant. But the Build America, Buy America compliance is significant, and I know personally of CMs that have told me the experience that they have of that, because it requires a lot of administrative assistance. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody's got any questions for me.
Commissioner Baxter?
So when we're talking about using a CMAR and the advantages of transparency with the project, is there going to be a way for us to see how the project is moving along? Like, is there going to be a website dedicated that's going to show like where we are in the progress, what funds have been used and what they've been used for along the way?
I think we can do that. The CMs do, I think they do. Did we do that before?
We don't use a website. I mean, they use Procore, that they can issue, permissions to search, whoever.
That's something we want them to
That's
do.
something that could be worked in.
Yeah, we can work that in.
Okay, and then my second question in relationship to the USDA grant portion of this and making sure that we have all of the filing requirements taken care of in the correct and most timely manner. Is that going to be something that the CMAR is going to make sure all of those different, like, quite frankly, complicated components get to the grant administrator so that we're making sure that we don't miss any deadlines?
Generally speaking, yes. You guys are, this guy right here is a step in between there, and so are we.
Okay.
So the idea, we were just talking about this beforehand with Tobias, and we talked about how we approve pay requests, for example. Well, typically the CM will have a monthly pay request where he's seeking payment for the activities that he completed that month. It first goes to the architect who will certify it, and that's a typical process. And then after that, it will go both to the chief and to us at the same time. We, as your project manager, will advise him that we believe that it's accurate, just like the architect certified. And then I think you're going to end up sending that certification to Tobias to approve. And
Okay.
so to back up, the CM will be aware of the additional reporting that's required.
Okay.
There's going to have to be some compliance with Build America, Buy America. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with that I personally don't even know what it is yet. We just know there's a lot of things that we have to pay attention to. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Both of their agreements will have that language that they reviewed by the USDA to make sure that additional constraints are put within the contracts to take compliance and so forth. And typically, the ones that have the Buy America, Build America.
I'm sorry. This is David.
I'm sorry. I'm David Rutherford with Wake County FD&C. As well as with that, what we've heard from the CMARs that have this federal funding, it usually takes an additional staff person just to administrate that, to do all the submittals and verification and so forth to make sure that they can certify it into the project, to give you that assurance.
And so we will be utilizing a CMAR as well as an additional staff member to make sure?
No, the staff member works for the CMAR, so
Okay,
there'll
all
be
right. I just wanted to make sure that I
multiple people on
understood the
site, so you have a
process
project
correctly.
manager, the superintendent, as well as an additional assistant project manager that would just be designated for this project to do that work.
Awesome, thank you.
That's the other advantage of the CM is that in general, they typically staff a project a little bit stronger than you would a small contractor. Any other question? Got two mics up here to be attended. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the MOU.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Carr-Richter. I'm a project manager with Wake County Facilities Design and Construction. I'm going to be working with Chief Perry, with our design team, and others, our CMAR eventually, to actually move this project forward. So I wanted to present to you all about our MOU Amendment 1 that we are asking for your approval of. So just to start and lay the background here, we have a memorandum of understanding between Wake County and Town of Zebulon that was signed in June of '22. That MOU was really how we kicked off this project, officially defining the town would be the owner of this station. It allowed us to start facilitating the schematic design, which Mike presented to you earlier. It defined the ratio of the spaces between the fire and EMS use, which also helped break down the cost responsibilities of that initial MOU amount funding the schematic design. And it really established that the county would be representing each party as the owner's representative moving forward through the project. So with MOU Amendment Number 1, we are looking to really move from schematic design through our full design and pre-construction phase. So this amendment is really to fund the full design of the project from design development through construction documents and bidding permitting documents. That's going to add other services, so that's both our design team, but also the pre-construction services that we're going to be looking for from that CMAR. It's going to extend the term of the MOU, just generally timing-wise, to get us through to the bidding and GMP, or guaranteed maximum price, phase with the CMAR. And it's really setting forth our intentions for how the project in general will be funded, and the allocations that we anticipate in the project funding for construction. That will get detailed more as we enter our ILA, or interlocal agreement with you all, once we get the actual construction cost from our contractor. But this is really just setting forth the intention. So when I mention that intention, that's really the USDA grant that Tobias talked about, the $7.5 million, will be applied to the project as a whole, and the remaining funds would be split between Town of Zebulon and Wake County, 51-49%. As Tobias mentioned, it's really our money that comes up first, but just to kind of tell you how the accounting of it is, that's all broken down as well in the MOU Amendment 1 attachments that you have, which breaks down both the current funding that we need to move through the design and pre-construction phase in Exhibit B, and in Exhibit C are cost sharing anticipated that will get further detailed in the ILA phase. Eric, did you have anything to add about the MOU Amendment 1 before I move on to next steps?
No, you hit all the highlights on that, the design, pre-construction, funding, the CMAR component. The most important thing, of course, is the allocation of the space and funding. So I think you got the highlights, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just also going to talk about our major approvals for this project as a whole, and really our next steps as we move this project forward. So we are looking for you all to approve the CMAR delivery method and the MOU Amendment 1 on April 1st, as we've presented to you. We are also looking for you to approve the USDA grant letter of conditions as Tobias presented. Once we have those approvals, we can hit the ground running and get our design team on board for the next design phase. We can get our CMAR procurement going, so we can get that CMAR on board and help us with our pre-construction phase. And really, our next set of approvals is going to come after we get our project bid out, our guaranteed maximum price, we finalize what the construction cost is going to be, and that's going to then go into our interlocal agreement, which will have to get approved by the local government commission, and then approved by you all and by Wake County's board. Once we get all of those approvals and the approval of the USDA, we will be able to give our notice to proceed to our CMAR to begin construction. So if we look at a project timeline and schedule for that, what that means is you'll see our first kind of red diamond on here. That is the approval that we need at your next meeting for us to get the MOU Amendment 1 approved and us going on the design side. That's critical path for this schedule. We're going to get our CMAR on board. We're going to get our design and pre-construction contracts in place, and we're going to move through all of our design phases until we get to our bidding and permitting phase. As I mentioned, our approvals that come after we have our final construction cost defined, and then we can move into construction. And right now, we're estimating that our construction would be a 15-month duration. We do need to work with our CMAR to verify that, especially with the Build America, Buy America requirements. We need a good understanding of Can we shorten that at all, or is that actually need to be expanded just in sourcing some of the materials, and certainly with supply chain issues that we've seen, even on projects that don't have the Build America, Buy America requirements. Sometimes we find issues with meeting construction duration in that sense. But right now we have a 15-month duration with a 2-month transition, with that getting us moving into the facility at the end of 2026. So with that, are there any questions? Yes.
So we are not going to know the total cost share portion that we as Zebulon are going to be responsible for until we get the GMP back to us, and that's probably going to happen in May, at the end of May in 2025?
Yes, it's going to be spring of next year that we will get the final actual costs of what we'll need to be committing. And, you know, we have estimates that we have produced from our consultant at the end of schematic design that are kind of helping us understand what we need to be budgeting for. But as far as the final number, we won't have that until May of next year. We are also, you know, between now and then, the part of the benefit of having that CMAR on board is that they will be helping us with preparing estimates all along the way. And that's going to bring some, you know, real information and insight into the cost and availability of items into those estimates. So it's not like we have no sense of between now and then what it's going to cost. It's just that the final bid number, that's what comes in May. So we will have insight, and that's one of the benefits of the CMAR, is that they can help us both in estimating costs and really tailoring to a budget early on, and we can get their sense and their input in how we might have to shift design or make decisions on design to stay within certain budgets as well.
And what's the contingency percentage that is going to be built into the GMP?
I don't think we have finalized that at this time. I don't know what standard you would assume for this.
Typically speaking, when we do a project, the contingency is actually outside the GMP, but it's still part of the project, and we typically look at between 5 and 7%.
Okay.
Okay.
And so we can anticipate the GMP coming back, and then an additional 5 to 7% is what we can count on for
Yeah.
the overall project cost.
Right.
Okay.
And
awesome.
usually, we've been fortunate enough to come in well within that, but that's been our standard, and
Yeah.
we think it's a good practice.
Yeah, great. Thank you so very much.
Are there any other questions on our next steps here? Great. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for?
Mayor, the only other thing that I'll mention, there was mention in the MOU agreement of Exhibit B, which itemizes the budget for the services that would need to be accomplished as part of that amendment. That is part of the action that you'll see for the Monday agenda, as well as the budget adjustment. That budget adjustment takes into account the costs associated with amendment, and then applying that ratio of 51-49 to those costs. And it basically just sets that account up so that we can begin to start issuing those contracts for that work to be done as we go through that process. So that you'll see that as well, but that is part of that MOU agreement as well.
And what's the total on that, Chris?
I'm sorry?
For that cost, what is that total in that?
So the total cost is right at $1 million for the cost associated, just shy of $1 million for Amendment 1. There's already some funds within the fire department budget that was allocated towards these type of items. So you've got the funding that's already in our budget. You've got the 49% of that, which would come from county revenue into the project, and the balance of that is about $250,000, and that would come from the general fund to make up the total amount of money dedicated to the Amendment 1 work.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments for the chief? Thank you.
Thank you.
As smooth as it could.
Yes.
FY25 request budget.
Thank you, Mayor. As we've done with the work sessions this spring, we've been spending time helping to prepare the board for what will be presented to them at their May regular meeting, which is the FY25 recommended budget. So what we've been using the work sessions for is to deliver what is the requested budgets, whether it be from a department or capital projects. So in January and February, we focused more on the operational requests. We're now transitioning into the capital requests. So you'll receive two presentations tonight, one on street capital projects and one on what we call our Walk Zebulon capital budget, which has in there things like sidewalks and greenways. The added significance of these presentations, in addition to preparing you for projects and giving you an opportunity to ask questions about projects in the foreseeable 10-year horizon, is to get some feedback from you on what you consider to be your highest priorities. They could be your personal priorities, or they could be priorities that you have seen or have been passed along to you. You'll see these projects again come before you at the April work session. The significance of that presentation will be your precursor for a potential notice of intent for a bond referendum on the November ballot. So the projects you're about to see, you'll see again. They will be the foundation of what could be a bond referendum. And again, this is to prepare you for any questions you've got on the project specifics, as well as for you to give us some feedback on what you consider to be your top priorities. And so on the streets portion of what could be a transportation bond, I'll recognize Chris Ray.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Thank you, Joe. Tonight, I want to talk to you a little bit about what that bond referendum could look like, but I want to set the stage before we begin and make sure everybody understands we are at the concept phase on the majority of these projects that you're going to see. So we want to let you know up front that it's going to take 3 to 5 years to fully design, permit, and construct these projects. So we want to put everybody on a realistic basis. These things are not going to be happening tomorrow. They're probably not going to be happening next year. So transportation projects take a long time between the easement acquisition, the permitting, possible stream mitigation, special grant requirements that may fall through some of these. So just kind of like Chris was talking earlier, these things take time. Currently, we are relying significantly on transportation impact fees to construct our roadways. Our Shepherd School Road project that we're currently working on basically draws down our transportation impact fees to a very small and manageable number. So to move forward with these things, we're going to have to seek additional funding. Unfortunately, one of the things with NCDOT funding is very limited, and even going through the Campo process is very competitive. So recognizing NCDOT funding is probably going to be very limited and probably not going to be able to be considered depending on the project. So that's where we are at the bond. You may recall we started this process last fall, summer and fall, going through some of these projects. You'll recognize these. We've updated some of the cost estimates and stuff, but just wanted to lay that groundwork today for you to start developing, as Joe said, what are your top priorities? Maybe what are your top 5? Not going to say you're limited on 5, but there's a starting point. And coming up with a ultimate dollar amount that we want to take to the public and issue for bonds. So let's get into the projects. Our first project you should be fairly familiar with is our North Arundel operational project. Just a basic recap, we will be putting the dual S on Pierce's Road, a center median that allows safer movements along Arundel Avenue, gives rear accesses on Jones Street, and creating what I'm calling a rear access street off of Hendricks to get into the parish properties. So all those benefits we've talked about for a while. We are in the design phase now. We're in about 90% design phase. We're working with our consultants to, this past year, you added a scope to this drawing that's here to allow 2 lanes north of the Sheets property and past Wake County ABC, tying into the proposed construction with Highway 55 and the construction that has been completed at Popeyes. So we're working through that, and we're making progress, and we hope to be able to move forward in the near future. Just a couple reminders of the revenue sources for this project. We have $956,000 of a $1.195 million grant from Campo. Our previous mayor was able to secure $200,000 in NCDOT small construction funds that are still being held and available. We also, DOT delayed some resurfacing work out there and transferred those funds to us that potentially could help us with the resurfacing of this corridor. And then once we do go to bid for this project, we recognize we're going to be over budget. This project is probably at this time roughly a $10 million project. We will be asking Campo for a 50-50 match. They are fully aware of this. We've had multiple meetings, Mike and my staff, with those guys, putting them on notice that we will be coming back. We recently had a meeting with them to give an update of where our schedule was and where we projected, and we shared with them at the time their portion of the 50-50 match could be approximately $4 million. At this time, we are recognizing that we're going to need an additional cash infusion of approximately $3.4 million to complete this work. And before I go to the next slide, is there any questions?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So just so that everyone who's been paying attention to what this project has been called in the past, this is going to take the place of what we've referred to as the North Arundel Widening Project. And we have expanded the scope so that we are in a better position to capture as much Campo funds as we possibly can.
Yes, ma'am. We are. The Campo's their standard policy is a 50-50 match, and you're correct. We did do change orders to our engineering agreement to do additional design work to get additional 2 lanes moved north. Also to rework the area on the south side from those properties there to redesign that due to we were unable to secure construction easements.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I think she's referring to something else. We brought before the board adding to this, and you're going to see some subsequent slides on some surrounding widenings. We took that Fuller project to Campo to see if we could get funds for that, and we did not meet the cut for that. We missed it narrowly, but we did talk to the board about that. We went back to Campo, and so we did not receive funding for those expanded projects. But Chris is going to talk about those as separate projects.
Okay, all right, awesome, thank you.
I'm sorry, I apologize for the confusion, but thank you, Joe. All right, any other questions before we move further on to, I think there's 9 projects here that we got to look at tonight. Hearing none, we'll move to the next one. This is a project that I've come to you before. This is the intersection of Pierce's and Proctor Street. One time we have participated with a Campo grant application with NCDOT. This installs a 70-foot concrete median roundabout at that intersection. Currently, this is an intersection that we've had some crash history with. It would then eliminate the existing 4-way stop The current average daily ban of cars is approximately 6,500 and growing with, as you know, we have approved Pierce's Landing, We Respond, and there's one other subdivision that's also north there that will be eventually adding to the traffic count in this area. The estimated cost of this project is approximately $1.5 million. NCDOT, this is a preferred project of NCDOT. For what we're hearing, that there are some potential funding options with NCDOT, but that has not materialized yet. So at this time, we're looking at it as a separate project because NCDOT has not come forward with a firm commitment on the construction of this project. Any questions about this project?
So to that earlier point from Commissioner Baxter, this is one of the additional items that we added to that previous project to get funded. This project has also been submitted independently by DOT through CAMPO, and again, that request did not meet the criteria for CAMPO funding.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions?
Well, what's the amount of land acquisition that we'll need for this?
That has, I'll have to get back with that. I got that in my preliminary numbers, and I got it from an estimate from NCDOT, but I don't have it with me. But
That's
I will
fine.
get,
That's
I will
fine.
get you that information.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Hearing no other questions, we'll move forward to the next project. This is the one that I think Ms. Baxter was referring to, that we applied for CAMPO to add for an additional scope of work, which would add additional roadway widening on Pierce's, the roundabout we just talked about at Pierce's and Proctor, do some upgrades on Proctor, and also connect the interconnectivity of Jones Street. Clearly, this will improve the crash history stuff we spoke about at Pierce's and Proctor. It also takes pressure off the 96 with alternative routes. It also addresses that growth corridor we talk about that's just north of this project area. And it's also going to help our school traffic area on Proctor Street, especially during peak times of drop-off and pickup. That's kind of what Joe referred to. We combined that with the North Arundel Avenue project at Campo. And like we said, unfortunately, we scored well, but we didn't score well enough for funding. I think we were 2 projects short of the funding level, but it is a project that potentially could be funded by the town. The estimated cost of this project is $7.7 million. Any other questions? Any questions, excuse me? All right, thank you. Let's go to the next one. This was one of the projects that I think we showed you at your retreat downtown last year. It was our downtown gateway roundabout. What you'll see here is this roundabout at Gannon and Arundel Avenue is offset a little bit. We're trying to offset it away from the gas station and some of the challenges that may occur with the gas station. But it gives us the chance to give us an entrance to downtown. It could be our landmark. It could put a significant structure in the center to welcome everybody to downtown. A couple benefits besides an aesthetic benefit is it will relieve congestion of cars. Cars do move faster through roundabouts than stoplights. One of the other benefits of this roundabout is, as you all know, is we have significant amount of truck traffic along Arundel Avenue. That'll actually slow them down. It allows cars to move faster, but the trucks will actually slow down, especially with the offset. Hopefully this will encourage them to find alternative routes and to minimize the number of large trucks in our downtown district. The estimated cost of this project is $3.5 million. Yes, ma'am.
So what we have happening quite often now at this intersection is where large trucks cannot safely make that turn, and they cause other vehicles in the lane that they're turning into to have to back up in order for them to be able to make the turn. Are they still going to, are they going to still have those problems with the way the roundabout is designed?
No, ma'am. When they do design the roundabout, they will design it for whether it's a large tractor trailer to move through it or one of our large ladder trucks or something. So the radiuses on the island and the way it's designed will allow the efficient movement for that. It's just to be slower. It will not be like the situations where you refer where people have to back up or we get damage to concrete curbs or poles that have been clipped over the years that we have seen. So this will allow a safer movement for those larger trucks, but it will slow them down. So hopefully, one of our alternative goals with this is to move them out of downtown.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
wonderful, thank you.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
With the roundabouts, do you guys also, or DOT, supply signage away from, so that people know that it's coming up? And how lighted are these, so people know that they're approaching this intersection?
Yes, ma'am. Anytime we do intersection improvements like that, we will be putting signage in all 4 directions in advance of that. Clearly, the earliest, we for surely will be starting at Sycamore Street, but there is MUCA standards for that, which is it's federal standards on signage, and we'll comply with those. But yes, we will be definitely putting signage in all directions, warning people about the improvements of the roundabout ahead.
And then, did you have a question about lighting as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime.
I'm sorry, on, not just before, but on the roundabout itself.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely a part of this project will include lighting through this corridor. Clearly, that is a critical piece of any traffic movement, is being able to see safe movements through there. So yes, we recognize and would see probably a LED lighting in this corridor here to make these improvements. Any questions? Any others?
Just one. There are, it looks like there's going to be crosswalk installation in all,
Yes, ma'am.
4?
Yes.
Okay.
Crosswalks and pedestrian signals to promote safe access.
Okay,
and movement.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Are there any utility concerns?
Right now, no more than the normal ones. We may have to relocate for some storm drainage or something, relocate some water lines or lower them. Probably the biggest challenge I would think at this time is working with the gas station and minimizing the impact there, or potential fuel stations, fuel tanks, and also the entrances and exits for the gas station. There's probably 2 of the bigger challenges that I see with this project.
You mentioned the gas station. Will there be any environmental studies as far as the gas tanks are concerned?
Yes, sir. We will make sure we do our due diligence in that, and make sure we have borings, and make sure when we do our subsurface investigations that we take that into consideration. And,
Chris, the white lines, I'm sorry, what does that signify on each corner?
each corner, I'm not quite sure. You're talking about there's arrows on this showing the movements. Is that what you're referring?
No, like, see in front of Walgreens, it's like making upside down L, and then there's.
Oh, okay.
You got a pointer?
That's the curb and gutter. If I believe that's what you're referring to, is the new curb and gutter and placement of that.
Like, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. That's the new curb and gutter.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All good questions. Any others? All right, let's move to the next one. This is an expansion. What you're going to see is we've taken the base project there with the roundabout, and in your next couple slides, we're going to be building upon those. This is a project that we've looked at that moves to the east a little bit over to Red Star and where Shepherd School Road and Proctor Street intersect there. We currently have got a light there, but we don't feel like it's the most efficient movement of traffic. So one of the things that we have considered is adding an additional roundabout. I apologize that my artwork is not as pretty as somebody had previously provided me this one, but I wanted to give you an idea. It basically mimics the same roundabout that we have at Gannon and Arundel, and then we do roadway improvements through the center there. Clearly, we think this will, it's the time to do this, is the time when you do the original roundabout at Gannon and Arundel, if that's something you want to do. But from a timing perspective and a cost perspective, it's most beneficial to do it all at one time. Right now, you're seeing about 12,000 cars a day move through there. So just like with Gannon and Arundel, we'll be relieving congestion in these areas and movements in these areas. Any questions?
Is this also taking into consideration of the traffic that's involved with the East Wake
Yes,
Academy?
That has all been driven out about the amount of traffic we're seeing on Gannon Avenue, and the potential backups at peak hours there. And that's one of the benefits of both of these roundabouts. We're moving these cars quicker and faster through this corridor. Any other questions? Hearing none, moving to the next one. This is another project that we potentially could add to the Gannon and Arundel Roundabout. Some of you were on the board when we reviewed these stormwater projects. This was the number 2 rated stormwater project, in addition to the one that we're currently working on West Horton that improves drainage from West Horton to West Barbie Street. So we feel like if you're making the improvements in the intersection of Gannon and Arundel, where some of these drainage issues are, it's most proper time to make these improvements. So we would recommend, if you deem appropriate, to address these now and add additional $1.4 million to complete the stormwater improvements at this intersection. So these are some pictures here that we've had over the years at the intersection of Gannon and Arundel, and also we're addressing some flooding and capacity issues that's on West Sycamore Street that ultimately tie into the intersection of Gannon and Arundel. We have done design work on this project previously, but unfortunately we have not been able to fund it due to the cost implications. So we do have a basis to build off from design if we add it to the roundabout at Gannon and Arundel.
So this is an additional 1.4 to the 7.5?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We tried to build this, and now you have an a la carte approach of what you wanted to add and put in. So we're showing these as separate projects, very similar to what we did on the North Arundel. Broke just the North Arundel access and operation separate from the Pierce's, Proctor, and Jones Street project. All right. Any other questions? All right. Next project. I believe we shared this project with you at the retreat this past fall. This is a project that was generated by Campo in 2022. It basically includes the roundabout at Pierce's and Proctor again, and shows improvements along Proctor Street. It does not include the intersection improvements there that are in the blue circle with Shepherd School Road and Old Bund. That is our project, but just wanted to show you how those tied in. It does show it as a 3-lane divided roadway through here. We believe this project it will be beneficial for moving congestion from Autumn Lakes, Shepherds Park, Barrington, Woodland Crossing, which is under construction now, Curly the Boys and Girls Club, and the school. It was rated as a high priority in the Campo report for 2022. Due to the low probability of development in this corridor, we believe this is probably going to take a state, federal infusion of cash to make improvements here. The estimated cost by Campo on this project is $6.5 million. Questions, comments?
Any thoughts on the renovation of the Zebulon Elementary School? Would they be doing any upgrades as far as the road in front?
We're not aware of any, and if I correct me wrong, Joe, if the school expands, they're not responsible for roadway improvements. Isn't there a general statute to that was recently adopted?
That's correct. The school is considering a renovation to the grounds itself. We might be able to incorporate that driveway realignment as a part of that, but that's all hypothetical at this point.
Any questions? Any other comments? The next project is, we have broke this project as Old Bund Road. And the next 3 slides, you're going to see us taking Old Bund Road improvements from Shepherd School Road, all the way to Highway 97. Just from a practical and a funding opportunities, we broke this down into 3 phases. Per your transportation plan, this turns into a 100-foot right-of-way, which would require dedication of right-of-way on both sides. It will require 2-lane traffic on both sides, separated by a landscape median with sidewalks, curb and gutter on both sides. This first phase takes you from our Shepherd School Road project now under design and takes you to Carroll Court. In this corridor right now, in 2020 was the latest ADT I get, which is about 2,200. We all know due to the development in the corridor is significantly more than that. but the estimated cost at this point to complete that scope of work is $4.4 million.
And this takes in consideration of the total build-out in those subdivisions and
Yes, sir.
the transportation tax of
Takes into
transportation
consideration
fees?
the build-out, the full plan, takes in consideration your transportation plan. And what was your last question, sir?
The transportation fees.
The transportation fee, yes, that would be yeah, we do have fees potentially coming from Barrington that would be added and help reduce this cost.
No, that's not the fee in lieu, that's the transportation impact fee?
And Barrington has to pay a transportation impact fee every time they sell a lot, basically. But we also, just like Autumn Lakes, where we negotiated off-site improvements that were required by the TIA, Barrington has those, and potentially could be a funding source to help make these improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go. Continuing on Old Bun Road and picking up at Carroll Court and getting it just across 64 million. This one is definitely sticker shock at $24 million. The biggest part of that is the bridgeway crossing there on 64 is estimated somewhere between 15 and $17 million. So this one makes this one a necessity that we have some type of federal funding and something we'll need to be looking at long-term to try to make, because the bridge improvements are so substantial and the widening of that road to be so substantial. So, all right, just keep going. And then the last piece picks up from basically just over the bridge all the way through 97. I didn't show the piece. It's basically up to 97. I wanted to show you the improvements here on 97, where would you be getting turn lanes and a signal. The estimated cost of this project is $14 million. It clearly improves the congestion around with the build out of Barrington. It includes the turn lanes and traffic lanes on 97 to facilitate those movements that increase residential development. And right now we're seeing about 1,300 cars on that section of Old Bun Road and stuff. Any additional questions on this phase? All right. This project here is a project you may have not have seen, but it is a project that Mike shared with Joe and I, coming out of his transportation improvements and looking at some of the existing congestion. His consultants are sharing with us that improvements along East Gannon Avenue are needed. So we did go back and build cost estimates based off of your transportation plan. One of the things through here that is a benefit, it will go from Red Star all the way to Walmart. And in that process, we are providing a 10-foot greenway connection from that location. So clearly, there's some residential neighborhoods in that area that clearly could benefit from that. Connection to Walmart and retail center. Redevelopment in this area is probably unlikely due to something that's already been built out at Southern Piping and Namaco. The estimated cost of this project is a little over $9 million. Clearly, this will help facilitate movement of the industrial corridor that we've had some traffic concerns with, East Wake Academy and Namaco and those areas around that area as we grow. Additional questions, comments?
So Chris, we're looking at approximately $90 million worth of projects, and we've got potentially only $6.6 million that could be had through Campo and other grant opportunities.
Yes, ma'am. I think if your math is correct, I think it sounds right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so.
And you got to realize these transportation improvements take us out a fairly long period. So they're out there quite a bit from a time point, but we need to start thinking and planning about them. Even if they're not in this round of bond improvements, there'll probably be one in a future year.
So from an operational and safety point of view, what projects are the ones that staff feels need to be addressed first? I mean, we all will probably have similar ones when you ask the board, but when it comes to what you've spent time studying, what projects are the ones that absolutely need to happen in order, in what order?
You want to tackle that one?
Sure.
Well, I'll try, I will.
That's all right. So when we come back to you at the April work session, there'll be a couple of things that we bring back to you. One is just going to be the practical approach, which is the amount of debt capacity that you can afford. And it's not just the debt capacity you can afford for transportation projects. It's going to be the debt capacity for other capital projects that are coming your way. So you already heard of one tonight in the fire EMS station. Relating to fire service that we haven't talked about tonight is the pending time frame of Fire Station 2 and Fire Station 3. You will also get into a conversation about adding to or creating new parks to serve the increasing population. So you've got a potential park bond referendum coming your way. And you may also have a facility bond referendum coming your way to upgrade this building, the police building, adding a new community center, adding another facility behind here, or even making improvements to Five County Stadium. So the long-winded answer to the first part is that we're going to come back to you with a limitation on what you can afford, not only for a transportation bond, but all the other potential bonds that I just talked about. As part two of that, we will then take that, what we think your tax base can afford, and we will identify the most pressing projects from a traffic capacity, from a traffic congestion, from an accident frequency, from the intensity of accidents, to give you some criteria about, okay, you've got so much money to work with, this is what we've identified as your top priorities to get done with this amount of money. But we'll provide that at your April work session. Right now, we really intended, we wanted to get you thinking, get you aware of some details of this, as well as get some feedback.
Any other questions, comments?
For me, I'm going to have to, since this is the first time we've seen this information, I'm going to have to really go back through and take a look at what the different scopes of the different projects are. Of course, it's tremendously disappointing that Campo has not been more receptive to our requests, because they seem to fund a lot of other things in other parts of the county. And so as far as like me being able to list my priorities right now, I can't do that until I get back over this information.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. If there was something burning, though, we didn't want to limit you on an opportunity just to share your opinion.
And I will reinforce it, as you review that, this is a complicated process and a lot of things soon. If you got questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Joe, myself, or Mike. We'll try to provide you with the best information we have to help you make this decision, because you know, we've started this process internally. Joe's selecting what we think are the top, and I will tell you, it's tough. It's not easy. So it's going to take a little time and thought, and if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask us.
I will say for the East Gannon Avenue, Shepherd School Road to Walmart, I really like that project and the Greenway connection, because as we all learned with the transportation, understanding the ride share, Walmart was the number one place that our citizens request rides to. So, you know, I want to make sure that I communicate that that is one project that I am very interested in, because of our transportation needs and what we have seen in our town with our residents needing to go to Walmart. So I don't know if that will help with it, but I think it's a good idea to take a extra look at that.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Guys, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
As I've alluded to at your work session in April, we'll be bringing before you other capital projects that are related to transportation to put you in a position to make a decision on the next step of a possible transportation bond referendum. That next step is called a notice of intent, in which you are notifying the Department of Treasury, specifically the local government commission, and your community that you intend to take out a bond referendum, in this case, on the November ballot. This will be, what we'll put before you is a transportation bond. And so while moving vehicles is important, transportation also involves walking. And so Mike is going to walk you through the more pedestrian-oriented projects under consideration. So with that, I'll recognize Mike to walk us through those projects.
And just before we start walking, let's have a 10-minute recess.
Before we start walking.
Walkability. Mike Clark.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of the board. The numbers for walkability are going to be much less scary than the numbers that Chris just brought before you, but the scope of the project is substantially less. The purpose of this is really of the sidewalks and the walkability is really to enhance the quality of life. Something occurs when somebody's on a sidewalk or a greenway where they have the capability to interact in a positive context, whereas if they're just stuck in a vehicle, you don't have that same capability. It also helps to promote that small town character that we're all trying to preserve, and it creates vibrancy. Suddenly you have the opportunity for folks who don't normally know each other to get to know each other. It improves safety, especially in the context of kids walking to school, families walking to particular destinations, where right now they may have to walk either on a grass strip, which is not ADA compliant, or worse yet, in the street. And while walking in the streets, sometimes on very low traffic streets, isn't nearly as bad, walking on some of the heavier traffic streets is just downright dangerous. It does also create an alternative means of transportation. There are options for whether it's bicyclists or just on the greenways or some other mechanism to get outside of the car. That actually helps to reduce the traffic congestion when it really creates more of a networked system. The first of the projects that we looked at is the Gill Street sidewalk. The sidewalk, as we looked at it, would be on the east side of Gill Street, namely because if you look at the picture, you see all those telephone poles on the left side. Those telephone poles are just about the property line. Between the two sides, we found that Gill Street was actually going to be far more manageable. It would require 943 feet of sidewalk. It would connect Gannon up to the cemetery and then a crosswalk to connect up to Gill Street Park. As I noted, it would be on the east side of Gill Street because that is the side that not only has the wider public right-of-way, which would prevent us from having to go and do right-of-way acquisition, but also had much less utility obstructions, but it did still require several removal of trees, several driveway crossings that needed to be taken into consideration, which are considered to be significant obstacles. Total for this project came out to be $116,000. Does anybody have any questions about this first project before I move forward?
Yeah, what about sidewalks leading up to Gill Street?
That we did not look at. Part of it was we're trying not to overlap the projects as much, knowing that Chris was going to be coming before you with projects that would include sidewalks on Gannon. We were not taking that into consideration. If it did, we would have to include additional sidewalk connectivity on Gannon, which is something that we could look at.
So the sidewalk connectivity with the Public Works Streets projects, I think I got that right, is going to make sure that the connectivity is there sidewalk-wise, and then folks would be able to walk down on the east side of Gill Street all the way to the park.
That's correct.
Okay.
All of the projects that Chris provided to you, that is a full construction based on our comprehensive transportation plan, which included those sidewalks, curb, gutter, all of the necessary features.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The second is a small section on Proctor Street, or what we call the Zebulon Elementary connection. This one is very unique in that there's several other sideway connections that are being built in close proximity because of some of the residential, neighborhoods that are under construction, as well as with the interchange improvements that we're making at Shepherd School and Old Bun. We realized that if this was located on the south, people could capitalize on it for the Boys and Girls Club, as well as we do have development interest in the vacant parcel on the northeast corner of Shepherd School and Old Bun, which would then connect into the sidewalk network that runs along Old Bun currently. This particular section would be 902 feet of sidewalk. And it, as I noted, would connect Shepherd School to Zebulon Elementary School. It did not look at going onto the school or beyond much. That would have to be something that we would have to look into further, especially as mentioned, there's discussion about possibly doing some reconstruction of the building and possibly reconfiguration of that site. With it being on the south side of Proctor, as I noted, it really provides a much safer alternative as opposed to a mid-block crossing on Proctor Road. As you can see from the photo, with the crest of the hill and the bend that doubles back, this is the approximate location that you'd have to have that mid-block crossing in front of the school, and it really doesn't create very clear view sheds, whereas having the signalized intersection crossing at Old Bun and Shepherd School made it much safer movement moving forward. It would address a lot of the pedestrian traffic for the nearby neighborhoods and could be constructed as part of the future redevelopment. While the property is for sale, we do not have any potential buyers or developers at this time. While it could be developed, we would still be looking at that to be anywhere from 3 to 5 years down the road. The price tag for this one is approximately $34,000 for the full connection.
Mike, with that project, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm thinking back to when we just talked about having the project adding the street light.
Mm-hmm.
So when we add that, there will automatically be crosswalks, is that correct?
That's correct, I believe. Yes, Chris is nodding yes, that
Okay.
there's crosswalks at that intersection. If you do move forward with the Proctor Street road improvements, however, this component would be addressed and this sidewalk improvement would be a component of that.
Okay, I'm asking because I'm thinking right now, if I'm correct, on the side of Old Bun where the Boys and Girls Club is and Shepherd's Park. Yes, there's, on the opposite side, there's a sidewalk already, correct?
Yeah, there's a sidewalk that runs up to this point, and this parcel, there's new development interest. And when that's constructed, our Unified Development Ordinance requires that sidewalk to be constructed from that point all the way up to the street. And with the signal here, one would be able to cross there to the Boys and Girls Club and then there, which creates a much safer movement than trying to run across this section.
Okay. Are you talking about housing development?
No, it's commercial.
Commercial, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any consideration on the possibility of, I know it used to be something called a safe school?
Yeah, safe routes to school could be a revenue source for this. Part of that is we would have to show the part of the population that lives in these neighborhoods that would be attending that school, and to show that this creates a full unified safe route to school for those students.
Is there a number that needs to be reached?
I don't recall specifically.
Okay.
I know
But there's also some additional separate Campo funding opportunities that could come into play specifically for pedestrian improvements as well.
The cost again of this one was?
The cost for this one was 34. Mhm. Any other questions on this one before I move on? Okay, the next one's a very short infill between the town-owned project that's currently under construction, heading south, as you can see in the photo. There's a gap that only accommodates one property. It'd be 130 feet of sidewalk, and it'd be set up so it actually avoids all of the obstacles. That telephone pole would be just outside of the boundary, and the property line, you can see where the orange flag is there on the left-hand side of the sidewalk. That's approximately where the property line, the front property line would be. It would connect multiple sections and create pedestrian access all the way from the townhome project into downtown without having to cross onto the grass areas. It's minimal disruption because it is only one parcel as opposed to multiple parcels. And the redevelopment of this particular parcel is unlikely, which means that the only way for the sidewalk to occur is for the town to go in to do it, as opposed to waiting for that particular home to be sold and redeveloped for some other activity or use.
Would we need a temporary easement for construction?
We would need a temporary construction easement, correct. Yep. And the cost estimate for this one is $10,000. Is there any other questions for this one before I move forward? Seeing none is a bit longer of a sidewalk segment. It would run along Poplar Street from Vance to Gannon. This is part of an expansion of a network. It'd be 1,120 feet of sidewalk, and we're looking to put on the left-hand side where the existing sidewalks on several of the stub streets stop. It would expand the existing downtown network, and there are some substantial obstacles, namely in I believe there's two telephone poles that would have to be modified or moved, and a couple trees and shrubs, but it's fairly level. There's not a lot of grading that would have to occur. Additionally, it does have adequate right-of-way along that entire section to be able to fit that sidewalk. The cost estimate for this one is approximately $90,000.
90?
That's correct. And the other component of this is that redevelopment along this section is also unlikely because it's an existing developed area. So we would not be able to rely on developers to construct this sidewalk in the future.
Is there any thought on like Wake County school bus stops? I know that, the other day I was behind the bus on Wakefield and Sycamore, and there must have been 17 kids that got off right there at that one stop and walking east back toward Sycamore. And there's no sidewalks on either side.
We will look at that one and bring that. That's not one that I was aware of. Was there any other? Okay, the last of the sidewalk projects is on Pony Road. This is a segment that runs connecting existing development up to Gannon Road. It'd be 430 feet of sidewalk located on the west side of Pony Road. One of the parcels may have a potential redevelopment, but it's questionable. The big thing about this one is it connects to the ZWX, or the express bus that goes into downtown. Part of the significance of that is a lot of the development that's in close proximity, including the apartment complex that's under construction right now, the apartment complex that's completed just south of that. The one that's under construction is this treed area right here. There's a completed apartment complex here, as well as the residential in this section. In some capacity, those are all subsidized projects and really geared towards low to moderate income or folks with disabilities. And as such, we've actually seen increases in folks with disabilities on scooters or motorized wheelchairs on this road here. You can see where the existing or the sidewalk stops there. But unfortunately, those folks are having to go out onto Pony Road in order to get to the sidewalks on Gannon Road to get up to the shopping areas as well as to the ZWX. Part of it has the potential for development. The other part is with the dollar store there, possible redevelopment, but that is quite some time in the future. We have not seen any interest in either of these things occurring anytime soon, which is one of the reasons that we're bringing it before you. The price tag for this one is $23,000, and that's not an exceedingly long stretch.
And the remainder of Pony Road to the end of where the currently being constructed apartment complex is, that's getting sidewalk as a part of the construction process, correct?
That's correct. You can see that sidewalk is constructed right there. That's for that. The other part that I forgot to mention is whenever we bring in these large residential developments and part of their TI, we look at, okay, how's it going to impact traffic? And if the TI requires it, they have to come in and do substantial traffic improvements. One such traffic improvement that's being done by Cadence Meadows, which is the mixed product townhome, or formerly known as the Pony Road Plan Development. They will be constructing a roundabout at this intersection with crosswalks, which will help to make a safe movement getting across to Gannon to the shopping areas and up to the ZWX. That's just an example of how we're able to leverage those there's green laser. How we're able to leverage those larger development projects to get the necessary road improvements where we can then build upon that as part of our pedestrian network. Does anybody have any other questions about this one before I move on?
I know we just received the notice about the funding for additional bus stops. So I'm just wondering, will that be taken in consideration as far as the walkability is concerned?
Yes. The couple things that we're looking at doing is adding in a couple additional bus stops, one possibly at Walmart, one possibly up at the East Regional Center. The other is relocating the existing bus stop that we have for the ZWX to pull it closer to Gannon Road, to pull it closer to the sidewalks, not only to make it more visible, which then makes it safer, but also make it more accessible coming directly off of the sidewalk.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Dick?
Roundabout project.
Yes.
That is estimated to take place when? Do we have a time frame for that?
They are actually working with NCDOT right now, and it sounds like they're going to be potentially beginning construction later this fall.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very short, because there are set parameters on when they have to have that completed based on their phasing of the development.
Okay. Thank you.
And my question was, so from that funding, and something that hasn't been necessarily made super clear, is that we're getting 2 additional stops, but we're thinking about moving the ZWX stop closer to Gannon?
Yeah,
Or
it
would
would,
that be considered an additional one?
it would be a relocation of one, and this is something that Wake Transit and I have been discussing for a couple of years about where along that corridor makes the most sense. We already have existing relationships with the local property owner and potentially working with him to bring it out from behind the building up to the front of that parking lot. That's the most desirable location, but that is still in the works.
Okay, thank you.
The last of the pedestrian projects that I have is a much, much bigger project. It's the continuation of the Beaver Dam Greenway, the Phase 2, which will complete the missing link. It'll help to address some of the traffic concerns on Old Bond Road, and it would be establish a mile of new greenways, and it would be able to accommodate several different activities, including road races or other special events. You think about when they close down roads for like 5Ks and such, suddenly this could become a viable option to help with that. And also, as you've heard me talk about, not only the sidewalks, but helping you to strengthen the greenway network. Within our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, our Transportation Plan, both of those really call for a network system within the town that then connects into other networks, not only within Wake County, but across the state. This is one additional segment that helps to get us that much closer towards that realization. And this one's a bit more expensive. This one would be $2.75 million to complete this segment.
And that's because it's crossing wetlands?
It's crossing wetlands. It's substantially longer than all the sidewalk projects. There's a lot of engineering work that would have to go into this. It's a much larger project, not only in size, but also intensity and scope.
Might be helpful to think of greenways as construction of two-lane roads. By the time you put in all the grading, you're effectively building a two-lane road.
That is all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Now, those greenways, is that included, say like, I don't know what you call them, I guess amenities along the trails?
No, like the fitness stations
Yeah,
and such, no, this would not include those, but that is something that we could look at adding in. But this is for the construction of the greenway itself. Which, as you can see, based on this graphic that Chris's team was able to put together, there is quite a bit of infrastructure that needs to be included.
I guess my other question would be, can this project be, I guess, broken down in phases?
It could, however, there's also economies of scale, so the pricing would change depending upon how it was segmented.
If we were to include this in a bond referendum, the funding would be for a 10-year period of time. So you could choose to break the construction into phases, so that you don't have to use all the money for this project all at once.
Was there any other sections of sidewalks or greenways or anything else that I have not talked about that you may be aware of that we should also take a look at?
Well, at some point when south portion of town develops, there's going to be needed either a crosswalk or access way going down Arundel Avenue. Right now, it's on the east side down to the park, but there's going to need to be some sort of continuation. So while that need is not emergent, I think that we need to keep our eyes and our thoughts on it, because either we're going to need to complete we're going to need to provide a sidewalk on the other side of the street, or we're going to need to make sure that we have approval to do some sort of crosswalk.
And there'd be a crosswalk across Arundel?
Across Arundel, right.
Okay. Any other questions? Walkability is important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
For the final presentation that staff has tonight, also related to the budget, you've had conversations earlier this month where nonprofits have come before you seeking grants. And since the inception of this nonprofit grant policy, the amount of money that's available in total in the line item is $5,000. So we wanted to engage the board in some conversation that might influence a budget that we recommend to you that might change that funding amount. And so with that, I'll recognize Caleb for him to share with you some feedback that we got from some nonprofits, and again, to engage some conversation, get some feedback from you that may influence the budget that gets presented to you at your regular meeting in May.
Appreciate it, Joe. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight, like Joe said, I'm going to go over the nonprofit grant funding policy that we currently have and some of the feedback that we receive from nonprofits in our community. The main thing that I want to go over with this is hoping to open an open dialogue and discussion on this topic rather than me just talking at y'all. I come from a nonprofit background before my time here, and so I have a certain level of expertise, but chiefly the policy that's going to come out of this is going to be based on your feedback mixed with the feedback of nonprofits in our community. So what I'm going to do is go over each of the points that were laid out by the different nonprofits in Zebulon from our initial meeting, as well as some concerns that you brought to me at the last meeting. And then I'm just going to go over point by point and hear feedback from y'all, answer any questions that you have, and hopefully facilitate a discussion that's going to be really beneficial for nonprofits in Zebulon. So first, just to go over the adopted policy that we currently have. The nonprofit grant is a pot of $5,000 designed for nonprofits that service Zebulon. Nonprofits can request up to $1,000 per their application, and they must meet a strategic plan focus area. Currently, they are available to all 501c3 organizations that service Zebulon and have been operating in Zebulon or servicing Zebulon for the last 2 years. The goal of this grant is to cover operating expenses, not capital purchases, so this investment must actually go to services in Zebulon rather than larger purchases that they make. What we had was a meeting, in order to promote this grant initially, what we did was a push on social media. We went through public input to further discuss this grant with nonprofits. We did robust email marketing. We built a nonprofit list, which was based around all registered nonprofits within the IRS and the North Carolina Department of Revenue, combined those together, combing through the list, and finding all nonprofits that are currently active in the town of Zebulon, along with nonprofits that we reached out into in past years that are currently active that we had contact information for. And we held a nonprofit luncheon and information session on this topic, which I'll get to in just a second. The nonprofit luncheon itself was held on January 31st of this year, and we broke it down into a couple different methods. First, we gave information on the nonprofit grant itself, which was led by our finance director, Bobby. And then we went into a much more robust conversation on the nonprofit grant itself and the health of the nonprofit community in Zebulon to figure out exactly how nonprofits were planning on utilizing this grant, to figure out how we can better work with them, and to figure out what nonprofits are currently doing in Zebulon. It was an opportunity, while we had everybody in a room together, to really discuss where nonprofits were at and how this partnership between nonprofits and local government can really grow. We had 25 participants from the nonprofit community in this room going over all that information, and we gathered feedback on the grant from all the nonprofits that were there, as well as some other feedback that we received afterwards. The main topics that we received, and I'll go into more detail on all of them, were feedback on the grant amount, the amount of grant that nonprofits were actually able to apply for, non-monetary resources for nonprofits, and a topic that y'all actually approached in the last meeting, which is the amount of time that nonprofits can be servicing Zebulon before they can apply for the grant, which is 2 years, and we received feedback that we want to discuss that further from all y'all. So the first point is the grant amount, and the main suggestion that came from the nonprofits in this room was that the amount that wasn't enough. Like I said, the granite pot overall is $5,000, and it's remained the same for a little over 15 years now. It hasn't been adjusted for inflation or any rising costs that have come out of it. Currently, there are 85 active nonprofits that are registered in Zebulon, which really goes back to the amount that this pot has. And outlying regions have several hundred active nonprofits that serve or actively looking to serve Zebulon. So just to give you a context of exactly how many nonprofits this grant could reach and the actual pot that's actually available for them to apply for. Another piece of feedback that we received was the amount of grant that nonprofits could apply for wasn't enough. The suggestion was that we raise the ceiling that grants can apply for and no longer make it just the $1,000. Similar to the grant itself, the $1,000 has remained the same for the last 15 years as well. And what we have found is that after this meeting, less nonprofits actually applied for this year's grant than they have in the past. And we believe that is a direct response from the ceiling and the amount not being worth nonprofits' times for them to get the level of funding they need to put forth the effort to apply for it. We also receive feedback on any assistance that we can have that is non-monetary for nonprofits. As many of y'all know, fundraising isn't just the biggest hurdle that nonprofits face, especially in a smaller ecosystem like Zebulon. We receive feedback from multiple different nonprofits that they are struggling with promoting and actually getting their nonprofit out there, that they are struggling with resources, so things like training, how to actually fundraise on top of just money, and other areas like that. They were struggling to identify new board members and volunteers who can remain active in their organization because nonprofits really are fueled by volunteers and volunteer hours to make them successful. And there was feedback to help interconnect the Zebulon nonprofit community. That means facilitate conversations between them, give them a space that they can continue to have these conversations and really build a network among Zebulon nonprofits so we can have a full community and not just separate nonprofits that are working on separate issues that might be addressing the same issue but overlapping. And finally was, again, the topic that y'all brought up, which is time before a nonprofit can actually apply for these. One thing that y'all noticed was that the nonprofit, or that the grant itself only went to nonprofits that serve Zebulon for 2 years or more. Now, I believe that the reason this was set was because nonprofits in the early years traditionally aren't as successful and they're more likely to fail than nonprofits that are more established. And so funding going to nonprofits that haven't been here as long might mean we're giving money to organizations that might not be around next year for them to apply again. That being said, top causes for nonprofit failure, number one ends up being fundraising. So it is one of those situations that, yes, many nonprofits fail in the first years, but also most nonprofits fail because they aren't raising enough funds to be sustainable. Additionally, though, nonprofits can also have been found to fail because they don't have long-term planning, because they don't have the right leadership in charge, or they don't really have that sense of direction, or they don't have the ability to adapt to the current market and the current needs of the organization. And with that being said, I am hoping that I can facilitate a conversation going by each of these points so we can get a better sense of the recommendation we can make on the future of the nonprofit grant, starting with the grant amount, but I am here for any questions.
Questions? Commissioner Davis?
As far as the grant amount, $500 to $1,000. I'm thinking about what you just said, the struggle for nonprofits to not just start, but to stay. Is it $1,000, was that a suggestion from the board, or was that a general suggestion from the public? Where did that amount come from?
The $1,000 is currently written into the policy. Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask me other questions when we get to that.
Yep, absolutely.
Commissioner Clark?
When you say grant amount, are you talking about the amount we're going to fund?
Beverly, can you speak into your microphone?
I can't even hear myself. When you say grant amount, is it the total of all the money we're going to give to the?
So grant amount in this context is that $5,000 pot.
So
that
you
is
want to know what we should do?
Yep, and I want, so what I'm hoping for this is a conversation between y'all and me, and then between each other on each of these topics, so we can get a better sense and direction.
Okay.
A big thing is that, at least in my experience, just having a conversation between you and me is only one part of this, but y'all all have a lot of institutional knowledge, both on the topic and in Zebulon overall, that is beneficial for a conversation between y'all as well.
Commissioner Harrison?
I don't have any questions right now.
Commissioner Baxter?
I still don't believe that it is the town's responsibility to fund startup 501c3s. And so I struggle with decreasing the amount of time that a nonprofit has been operating to under 2 years, because I feel that they need to show that they are actively participating in our community and serving a need in our community before we go ahead and dole out grant monies. As far as the amount, I don't have a problem increasing that, and I don't have a problem increasing the number of people that can apply. Traditionally, we haven't had a set number per se of applicants that will accept, but you know, sometimes it has gotten difficult when we've had $5,000 and 7 or 8 different 501c3s that are doing good work in our community come before us. And so I don't mind increasing that, but we do also have to take into consideration that we do have nonprofits coming before us that are making monetary asks outside of this grant funding, and that we have organizations that want to use our facilities but also need to use our staff, and that does come with an associated cost, even though sometimes it's like, oh, we can use the municipal center. That doesn't cost anything. That tends to be the mindset, but it actually does, because we have a lot of prep and time spent during the event, as well as cleanup that we need to take into consideration. And depending on the event, we might also need to have a police presence or some kind of fire presence, and all of that comes with a cost as well. So I think that we need to consider this a little bit more as, instead of just the monetary assistance, like if there's going to be monetary assistance, are they also going to be able to come back before us with some kind of non-monetary ask?
And so I think those are all incredibly valid. Joe, I'm going to let you kind of answer if that should be included in this policy or if that would be a separate policy that we would address.
Well, you've given us enough feedback. I think we can craft a policy for you to critique and evaluate if it fits what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, I got one right fast.
Go ahead, I just had a follow-up for Shannon.
Okay.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Let's get the follow-up first.
Okay.
Tell me, what do you mean by a separate, are you saying like a separate policy for like facilities uses versus the grant stuff? Is that what are you saying?
Not necessarily, like we might have to actually look at it as a whole. I mean, if you want $2,000 from us, but then you're going to come back and you're going to be asking for $4,000 of non-monetary assistance, that's actually quite a considerable amount of money for one nonprofit in one fiscal year. And so there's definitely a case to be made to consider each request individually, but I think that we just need to be cognizant of it when we're kind of talking about a policy being crafted.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Thank you.
Commissioner Miles.
I think for me, I'm looking at the time thing. I know most organizations need that at the beginning. I'll give an example that we've been dealing with here recently that's doing great. And I think the assistance that we gave them kind of catapulted them to success. Angel Prince is the first thing that comes to mind. I look at that couple that's doing that thing, and I think just that, to be able to assist them as with the facilities and things of that nature, having them come back and give a report, and each time I see them, they're kind of like expanding. I look at the social media, I look at them in the community, they're still doing great things, and I know that we were assisting them at the beginning. So I think that time frame is going to be very important, that we figure out how we can do it and what we can do if we require them to come back and give kind of like updates or whatever it may be, but it's definitely going to be needed at the beginning. 2 years out, that nonprofit probably has struggled quite a bit, the ones I know. That is the time frame when they need the funding the most. And it may seem like we're doing a handout or whatever it may be, but I know they're helping in the community so much more than kind of things that we aren't able to do as a municipality from our park and rec or from different departments. They're assisting us with our youth or whatever it may be. So that funding would be early enough would be very important to me.
My comment would be, that is a vulnerable time for most of the nonprofits. However, I think one of the thought processes that went into only giving that amount that we were giving is because you don't have to request an audit. And I think after you give X amount of dollars, and Attorney Vernon, could you speak to that?
Yet there is a requirement that anybody that takes public funds have to file an accounting of how they use the funds on an annual basis.
That would include the value of non-monetary assistance as well? Say we offer the use of the facility?
Yeah, I don't know that detail.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I guess the other concern would be if you are just a startup, you probably haven't gone through any type of audit process as far as your funding is concerned. And, it's kind of a slippery slope there because I have been on nonprofit boards and they have all great intentions and they sound good and they even do good work, but they are lousy bookkeepers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're a lousy bookkeeper, you will lose your 501c. And that's not a knock on the work that they do, but that's just the nature of funding with nonprofits. In fact, I have removed myself from some boards because their books just didn't quite look right to me, and as a municipality, we have to be careful if we want to associate ourselves with those nonprofits. I know one year we gave nonprofits to this equestrian therapy, and a few months later, the horses were starving to death on Channel 5, and so I don't know how long they had been in business, but the association, we got to take in consideration that we want to help these nonprofits, but they need to be accessible as far as their accounting is concerned, because it's a reflection. We're giving money to somebody that doesn't have an accountant or CPA or even a good bookkeeper to keep up with what they're trying to do. So I'm all for raising the amount because, it's $5,000 is not much. And like Caleb was saying, nothing has been considered as far as inflation or cost of living or anything since this time. So I think that's definitely something we can look at. But, a nonprofit that hasn't been around long enough to be audited, I think that is a consideration.
So is there something we could do, kind of like do timelines or make them kind of give accountability for those funds or something like that? We can put something in place like that?
I'm not sure, but there may be resources out there to assist some of these nonprofits with their bookkeeping or accounting. And if they can maybe get, I hate to say audit, but maybe get somebody to look at that's reputable, that has helped other nonprofits with their bookkeeping, to say, well, theirs look good, and we vouch for what they're trying to do. Something to kind of back up why we're giving this money.
I know one municipality that did that with the ARPA funds. They put a lot of money. Durham did that. Something you might want to look into. They put a lot of money into their nonprofits and had those guys where they had accountability timelines and kind of like just checking where the funds were going. So I know Durham did a great job with that. So I'm going to take a look at that.
Well, part of our policy in the past has been that they've had to come back before us and kind of give a breakdown of what's happened with their funding since the last year. So we do require that, and I would expect that would transition over into a newer policy that we would ask them to come back before us. But I do know that we did have a few years where we had so many folks apply that we were like, all right, what if we give $125 to this one and then $250 to this one? And at that point, those aren't meaningful grants for those nonprofits. So while I do still feel like there needs to be a little bit of proven service and longevity, I think that we absolutely can consider raising the amount that we have available.
And my recommendation would be to any nonprofit that's just starting, a lot of the services that they're wanting to provide are being provided by other nonprofits. If they would partner with the already existing and established nonprofits, it would help their mission also. Because just for example, book bag giveaway. Everybody wants to give away book bags when it's time to go back to school. I mean, if just one of them would just consolidate that and say, well, we're going to give out book bags to everybody, rather than us giving money to each one of these folks that's doing the same thing.
There is a lot of overlap with nonprofits, and that's really an excellent point, because we do have a lot of people with super awesome large hearts that feel like there's a gap, but they haven't necessarily done some door-to-door research to see if it's already been done. And so there's a lot of duplication of efforts.
I mean, because I've seen folks ride around to each one of them and get book bags, I mean, I'm just being honest.
Give a book bag for every day of the week.
I've seen one family go around and get 5 or 6 book bags from each nonprofit.
Oh, yeah.
And what they do with them, I don't know. Sell them or whatever.
And so that does get back to the nonprofit community health overall. One thing that we did realize from this meeting that we held, this luncheon, was that the nonprofits really aren't talking to each other, and there is a lot of overlap in service.
Yeah.
So it does beg a question on whether or not that is a service the town provides to try to get better health for the communities getting talking together. If we just want to facilitate discussions and let them do that, if that's something that we want to partner with another organization and let them take the reins, but just know that we're a resource they can fall back on.
Is there anything available through Wake County? Because I feel like they've got a lot better handle on dealing with nonprofits, and they probably could be of assistance and lend some guidance there.
I'm unsure, but I can definitely check.
And
what did the
Zebulon,
chamber?
I was going to say there's a lot of work within our community with the Zebulon Has Committee, with Wendy and the Chamber of Commerce, where a lot of our nonprofits are coming together to make a bigger impact, and they're doing a lot of collaborations. So there are a lot of collaborations going on within our community with our nonprofits coming from out of these different meetings and programs that they're putting on. I wanted to also say, I do think that we should increase the $5,000. when I'm thinking about the 2-year, I'm a nonprofit founder, so I know the first 2 years, hey, we were in and out. You know, I wouldn't have come before the board to ask for money because I had we didn't know what we were doing, honestly. We just had a vision and we wanted to execute the vision. But what I will say is maybe we don't allow grants for those that have been open 2 years or less, but maybe we find a way to help them with facility rentals or help them use our stuff with maybe not staff, maybe not paying for staff, but if they wanted to use a facility. And that's just because in that 2 years or less, it is a critical time. And so there is assistance that is needed to help them do well in the community. So maybe there's another way that we can assist our nonprofits outside of the grant within our community. I don't know, but.
Yeah, and I can definitely talk to Sheila about throwing something together for early nonprofits and taking a look at parks and recreation facilities and what we can do there.
Yeah.
And that's a very fair point.
And I don't know if you all are looking for like a dollar amount or for us to give you maybe like an idea of what we want the grant to go up to, because you think about inflation, you think about the cost of living, you think about the cost of things, and $5,000 is just not a lot. So I don't know, what would please the board in a dollar amount to make the pot go up to, but I'm thinking 15 years ago, $5,000, maybe $20,000. I don't know. I'm just throwing out random numbers. Get you a tank of gas. So
I'm happy to do research on a feasible number, and we can take a look at, what $5,000 would be worth now if we use today's dollars and everything. I'm also happy to entertain any number that y'all have. I know $20,000, that seems like a decent jumping off point, but I'd love to hear from anybody else about that.
Could you look at some of the surrounding municipalities and see just what they're doing?
I certainly can, yeah.
That'd be great.
Are they doing anything? Are there any that we know of that are doing anything?
Some communities do, some don't. Nonprofit relationships with government is very much like a community by community basis is what I'm finding.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And please reach out to Wake County for some guidance.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, Caleb.
Mayor, that concludes the staff's presentations. The board has some outstanding business in front of you regarding meeting minutes.
See the items that were tabled on March 4th, 2024 meeting. We have two motions here. The first, the board needs to approve the closed session minutes listed in approval. Do we remember what those were?
They're listed on the agenda.
On the back.
On the back. Oh.
Yes, sir.
Is there?
The only designation or correction really from the ones that are on for approval is the March 6, 2023 closed session minutes. Is that I'm not sure that they what was accurately captured was what the board decided upon, and that was that we agreed to move forward with the purchase of the properties using general funds because we did not want to use HUD funding because we would have had to designate a use for it at that time, and the board was not in agreement to use that to designate those spaces as like a permanent parking lot area.
What I would recommend is you pull those to not be approved so that they can be reviewed and then they'll be brought back to you.
Okay, so
And
then,
I would pull them from the approval and the unsealing, please.
Okay, then I'd like to pull the March 6th minutes.
That's both. Well, we have to do the other one when we get to the other one. The unsealing.
Actions,
That's
he's
two
asking.
different actions, right?
Two different actions.
Yes, it's two
Okay.
different actions.
Okay.
So you would just make a motion to approve as amended for the approval of the closed session, and then when you get to the unsealing, you would remove them as well.
Okay.
And then make a motion.
Commissioner Baxter,
Okay, hang on a second. Let me just make sure that that's all that I have. Yeah, so I guess I make a motion to remove the March 6th.
You just need a motion to approve the
amended.
minutes as amended.
Okay,
Because
so-
you pulled them.
So can I move to approve the minutes as amended?
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Miles. Any comments, questions? We have a roll vote. Commissioner Davis? Commissioner Clark?
Favor.
Commissioner Hurst?
Favor.
Commissioner Baxter? Commissioner Miles?
Favor.
Motion passes. Next is concerned to unseal closed session minutes that's listed on the agenda. Would that March 6th pertain to that one also?
Yeah, it would. So I need to make a motion to approve the unsealing of the minutes as amended, correct?
Correct, because you're removing
Right.
March 6th from that list. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
That is the motion. Is there a second?
Seconding.
Thank you, Commissioner Miles. Any questions, comments? Roll vote, Commissioner Miles?
Favor.
Commissioner Baxter?
Favor.
Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Clark?
Favor.
Commissioner Davis?
Favor.
Motion passes. Thank you.
And before we wrap things up, can we please let the public know how they can gain access to the minutes that have been unsealed?
All they have to do is contact me, and we can provide them for them.
Okay, so it's not an RFI, it's just reaching out to you and you'll be able to,
It's the same thing. It's a request for information. It's a public records request, but all they have to do is contact me and say that they want a copy of those minutes, and we will provide them. We've had some requests already, which will be provided tomorrow, or well, next week, since we're off tomorrow. They'll be provided next week to fill that request.
okay, great, wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Well, I hope everyone have a good Easter, Good Friday, and good Easter holiday. Stay safe. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Miles. You have a second? All in favor? Meeting adjourned.